Hello and welcome to the big picture. The Indian economy, which was seen as going through some of the leanest times in the last several years, suddenly looks healthier. The reason for this is the government's decision to revise the method of calculation and moving the base year from 2005 to 2012. This has resulted in the GDP growth, which was seen as having been only 4.7% in 2013-14, now looks a far more impressive 6.6 or even 6.9%. The decision of the government to revise the methodology also includes moving from the current factor cost method to market prices, which is more followed internationally. Though the fact that this revision of methodology makes the economy looks much healthier, many questions have cropped up. We will discuss today how this revision will have an impact on the overall figures of the economy and also on the impact of it on global terms and also on the economy as a whole. To discuss this, I have with me Professor Bhattacharya, Director, Institute of Economic Growth, Professor Praveen, Center for Economic Studies and Planning at the JNU, Yatish Rajawat, Senior Journalist, and Dr. Santosh Mehrotra, also a Professor at the JNU. Welcome to all of you. Professor Bhattacharya, was this revision here, from 2005 to 2012, was this something which was, on the cards? This revision was on the cards, or did it take you by surprise?
Well, I'd just like to inform the viewers, I was the Director, Institute of Economic Growth, as well as later on some more positions. Okay, now, primarily as an economist and also member of the National Income Advisory Committee. You see, this is a part of a regular exercise.
Yes.
Periodically update the GDP pace. Why it is necessary? Over time, new products enter the market. Old products disappear. So you have to keep shifting. Prices, allocations.
Sorry for interrupting. When was the last revision made?
2004-05.
Before that?
Before that, 1999.
Okay.
Then 93. Earlier, it used to be about 10 years time before they change. Now the decision is to shift as quickly as possible, typically about 5 years. The reason being 5 years, after every 5 years, we have a full survey of National Sample Survey.
Right.
So you get a comprehensive data of the economy with the National Sample Survey. So this time, what they have done.
Why was it that since it was done in 2005 last, why was it not done till now? Why was the revision?
Every year, there is an annual sample survey done.
Right.
That's a smaller sample. Full sample of National Sample Survey typically covers 3 lakhs household nationwide. Annual is between 50,000 to 1 lakh.
Right.
So we generally rely more with full survey. Full survey, greater attention is paid on methodology, data, comprehensiveness, etc., etc. But 2011 shifting base, it should have been 2009-10, but then they wanted to use 2011 census data.
Okay.
You see, the workforce composition, participation, National Sample Survey also gives, but then that's a sample. Since you have a complete census data, 2011, so it was felt that better shift it to 2011. And that's the reason why this. So difference you can see.
It didn't even happen in 2011, it didn't happen in 2012, it didn't happen in 2013, it didn't happen in 2014 also.
Now onwards, till next NSS, there's a choice. Either you shift next NSS, but that will be too early. Probably 2021. There will be another revision, new census data will come.
Yeah.
Please note, after the new data comes, takes about 3-4 years process, comprehensive data.
As far as census is concerned.
Census is concerned.
So, Praveen, so this was something which should have been done earlier because as Professor Bhattacharya explained why it was delayed.
No, it's a good idea to do it every once in a while, maybe 5 years.
Right.
I think that's a good idea.
So there is because why I'm asking you this question is there are speculations that giving political twist to this whole thing.
Right. But in any case, the base year now is 11-12.
11-12.
And also, we must keep in view the downside of it. It, of course, makes intertemporal comparison difficult.
That is exactly the point.
So, you can compare last 5 years, but then what do you say about the preceding 10 years and so on?
I was about to come to that. So that how is this change going to affect both positively as well as negatively?
So, in terms of the downside, as I said, the big problem is if you are talking of what happened during the UPA period, right? Again, I mean, one can say that, look, we don't know what happened before a certain point, after a certain point. The only thing that we can talk about right now is 11, 12 onwards,
Right.
the last 3 years, etc. Right? And as Mr. Chidambaram has rightly celebrated, that based
Yes,
on
yes.
this, this is something which puts us in a very good light, etc.
Yes, we didn't do as badly as you
Exactly,
projected.
exactly. No, but
So one
basically,
second, yes, sir.
sorry.
Actually, later, CSO will revise the earlier estimates using the latest methodology. That revision is never perfect.
No.
But a comparison will be made later on. It takes about a year or two for CSO to complete the exercise. So we shall get back also UPA regime data based on the new methodology.
New methodology. Okay.
But on the other hand, you see, what this method, for instance, has done, two things have happened, more comprehensive data on corporate activity,
Right.
and then better data based on newer surveys
On
Please
household
note,
spending.
Please note, newer surveys of spending by households and informal businesses.
Yes.
There is no way that you can make any corrections with retrospective
of the
effect
previous one.
as regards these things.
Okay.
Yeah, particularly the latter thing. So there will be those problems.
Corporate activity, maybe you can get
can
the
do
data.
up to a point, but even there are serious issues.
Yes.
Yeah. But on the other things, I mean, how do you go about it? In any case, we know so little about so-called informal sector, the problems there. Both Santosh and I are associated with a department in JNU which is informal sector and labor studies, and we can vouch for it. There are serious issues in terms of data comparability and coverage. Very elementary,
Right.
sort of services sector. What do we know about it? So there are all kinds of issues. What gets covered in this particular methodology? There is no way that you can go back to 2005 or 99 or whatever else, right? So there are those challenges which makes intertemporal comparison obviously far more serious, right? On the other hand, the positive is that yes, probably we are getting a better coverage, but is that something which is arbitrary? Is that something which is adequate? Those questions need to be asked.
Right. Okay. Santosh, the question is this.
It is not a question of arbitrary or...
I'll come to you, Yatish, I'll come to you. Santosh, the question is
Let
this.
him actually come in.
The question is this, that, now it shows, some people are saying that last year's GDP was 6.9 according to this new calculation. Some say 6.6, whatever, between 6.6 and 6.9. But the actual GDP which we were told was 4.7 in 2013-14.
Right.
This kind of large scale changes taking place.
50% increase.
How does it impact the economy? How far is it reliable?
No, we have to recognize that three changes have happened, and these are changes which are reflective of those three changes. They are definitional and coverage changes.
What are these three changes?
Yeah, I'm coming to that. The first change that has happened is that so far we used to advertise only the GDP at factor cost.
Yes.
We are now in
Market pricing, we can
at
give
market price, which essentially means that we are including taxes. That's one. The second is, as my colleagues have already pointed out, that the base year has changed. Earlier the base year was 2004-05, now it's 11-12. And the third change, which also accounts for this difference or this gap, is the fact that the coverage is wider, is larger, because as I think again my colleagues were emphasizing, the economy evolves. The economy is constantly diversifying. It's not just that it's growing, but it's diversifying the product mix and the service mix. So new services and products are emerging. So there is a increase in coverage. These are the facts underlying this gap. So we shouldn't make too much of this in particular. So that doesn't worry me. I mean,
What worries you?
Well, actually, in some ways, let me just say a few words about what perhaps could be the upside of this. Because, first of all,
You can come to the downside also.
we'll come to the, if you give me the time, I'll come to the downside also. But let me tell you at least two upsides. One is that we are now using a method of market price estimation of GDP, which is
more
internationally comparable figures. So that's very helpful.
Right.
The second, I think, is that in the environment, the sort of rather pessimistic environment that we've been in for the last
Right.
few years, this gives the impression not just to ourselves but
world.
to the rest of the world that we were not doing as badly as we thought. So there are upsides to it.
Absolutely. So what, you don't want to talk about the downside?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying I'm happy to talk about the downside. I mean, we have to wait to see. The fact is actually in some ways, one shouldn't, it's a factual change. Why are we giving too much meaning to it? I don't believe that we should be giving.
Okay.
No, it's not that I don't want to give the downside. There isn't sort of, the downsides has been talked about by Praveen, because how do you make intertemporal comparisons? That's a real issue.
Yatish,
it will remain an issue.
Yatish, how do you look at this? This was, as all my panelists say, that this was something which had to happen, which should have happened a little earlier, but it didn't happen for various reasons. Now, one of the things which Praveen also talked about is that these new figures which are coming up, which will come up, will be difficult to reconcile to the old figure, to figures of the other, in some of the other indicators. So, what I'm saying is, that will it make a difference at all?
Girish, there are two issues here. One, will this make a huge difference to the previous year figures? Now, NSO will revise them, and people who follow them continuously will take the revised figures into account. So, I don't think so that's too much of a concern here. The bigger issue is, of course, that we've changed from from factor cost to market prices, and indirect tax section will now be captured in the GDP numbers. So that's a bigger change, and that's a wiser change. So I won't read too much into just the fact that this methodology has changed, but the fact that the Statistics Department, the CSO, has actually done a much better job of collecting data, which has been a concern in the past. If you remember, a couple of years back, when they had to actually go back and revise the index of industrial production, and they had to revise it downwards. Now, the quality of the data was a concern, and that had raised issue worldwide, that is our data dependent to project or to accept. Now, while this methodology is the outer shape of these figures, the good part of it is that I hope the CSO has done a better job of improving the quality of the data behind it.
Okay. Professor Bhattacharya, dependent data. He was raising issues about whether the data is dependent. Is this more dependent data? Will this be more dependent data and more credible data?
Let's put it this way. See, the national income is estimated in two steps. Some data you get direct. We call it primary source. Say the corporate balance sheets.
Right.
Some of the bigger services. Agriculture, harvest, production technology. Some data then are imputed. Say the small scale informal sector industry.
Right.
We don't have a day-to-day balance sheet data. So what CSO does, based on a particular year, the larger segment production, they calculate the ratio of the smaller segment production. These are called some of the imputed numbers. These are periodically revised. I'll give an illustration. What is the contribution of hotel sector? Now you have the 5-star hotel, you get data, but every small town you have a small hotel. So sample surveys are conducted from time to time, that if large scale sector is done this much business, what is small scale sector and some ratios, input ratio. Now efforts are made to update, but let me tell you, with some international experience, much though at the moment India's primary component of national income roughly touching 70%, still 30% are imputed. But in the international practice of a developing country, we are quite, advanced in that respect, because not many developing countries are able to capture 70% of the economy in the direct method.
Which we are doing.
Which we are doing at the
Okay,
moment.
sir, we will move a little bit. The practical question. So now, can we say with any amount of authority that actually the Indian economy was doing much better than we thought in these last 2-3 years?
We don't know comparable picture of the earlier years using the revised methodology. So 6.9 against 4.7.
Saying
Certainly for 3 years, yes.
for last 3 years, last 3 years.
Yes, answer
No, last 3 years,
on that. Yes.
all you can say 6.9 is internationally very healthy number. But I haven't yet seen the details, though I'm a member of the committee, of all the, internal calculations and everything, how some of the imputed new numbers have come. These are all detailed methodology works. Sometimes, of course, imputations go wrong. Supposing in a particular year, things were very good. You have captured it good, and you are projecting every year good, irrespective of whether subsequently
There's a problem there.
That's a problem.
Okay.
It's a short period, 3 years.
For instance, manufacturing sector, it is said,
Right.
manufacturing sector,
Substantial
0.7% was what was told
Right.
that it is
Now it's
growth.
5
Now we are saying 5.3%.
Yeah, exactly.
This is huge,
Exactly,
How
exactly.
can that happen?
Please
that is
note,
where-
these numbers are first round of estimates. They're always subject to revisions. First round estimates get highlighted in the media. Subsequently, when you look into it, there'll be quite revisions.
No,
No,
quiet
nonetheless-
revisions okay,
no,
but will it be any substantially
No, no.
different?
Sometimes it
Nonetheless,
does. I have seen sometimes even positive number becomes negative and negative number becomes positive in the past.
You see, basically, since there has been a very significant improvement in the coverage of informal businesses, now instead of 5 point whatever, it can become 4 point something or maybe even 6. We don't know in the revised thing. Nonetheless, fact of the matter is
this is a dramatic
absolutely,
difference.
absolutely, and this is precisely for this reason that your coverage of certain segment has improved. On the other hand, as I had said earlier, that it is still arbitrary because our coverage, who knows how adequate it is? We are still groping in the dark in many ways. I mean, Professor Bhattacharya rightly mentioned that it's just about 70% which is direct method, 30% you are imputing and so on, right? I mean, even 70-30, I'm not so sure, right? There's so many activities which my senses are simply not getting captured. Yeah?
Santosh, now this methodology which is being changed from factor method to market factor cost to market price.
Market price.
Is it, if all of you are saying that it's more international and things like that, but can we do the right job using that market pricing mechanism? And do you think that, it'll be easier also? Will it be easier at all?
It's possible. You are asking a hard
Election
question.
point
It's
of view, I think it
possible
becomes-
that
I'll come to Yatish.
it's possible that because the share of organized sector in the economy is growing, there is no question about it. As a result, the possibility of capturing their data directly is higher. So I mean, Professor Bhattacharya.
But
correct me
earlier,
if I'm wrong.
as Praveen was pointing out, informal sector, will you be able to get
This is
the
what
hang
I'm
of
trying
it?
to answer your question.
Yeah.
It is your question that I'm answering. That let's assume that Professor Bhattacharya's number, about 70% numbers of the CSO come from direct sources, primary source, while the remaining is imputed. Now, that 70%, obviously, that share has been climbing over a period of time. It's probably going to go on climbing. It's more difficult to collect information about the informal sector. In absolute terms, the informal sector continues to grow, but the real issue is whether, as a ratio, as a proportion, the organized is growing. And we know that the share of organized is growing consistently. Therefore, the likelihood is that the credibility of our data is going to become, and because those are market prices, and it's easier to collect information about market prices.
Is going to become what?
It'll be easier and better,
Okay.
and
one
more
more
credible over a period.
One more question
as
to
we
you
move
before
forward.
before I go to Yati. One more question to you is, as far as employment figures are concerned, there were last few years we have been discussing this. After this, you think that we will be getting, because I haven't seen any employment figures, revision of the employment figures.
This is not
We still don't have nationwide employment data.
This is not intended to collect that.
And this revision also is not going
It is
to.
not going to impact
It's not going to impact.
No, not
in
going to
any-
impact
in
that
any-
at all.
Okay. Yatish, you wanted to say something when Santosh was talking.
I just wanted to say that market prices are much easier to collect because of the fact that they're available to in the larger scheme of things. Now with the electronic markets in places, it is also possible, if the ministry wants to, check back these prices for products and set a benchmark for them. In fact, it was difficult, and because of the informal sector prices varying a lot and indirect taxation not being captured there, that was always an anomaly in the system. So, I mean, we are moving towards a better system in that sense, and the quality of data is improving. I mean, incrementally, of course, but hopefully in the longer run it will be much better than we have seen in the past. So,
Okay, Praveen, one very innocent question which I have, in this country which is basically a cash economy, market pricing, when you go through market pricing system, how accurate will be to what extent will be
You see, in principle it would appear, precisely because of account keeping reasons,
Exactly.
etc., that movement from...
And the fact that, there are varying figures of the number of the black economy in this country.
So the first point, in terms of basic principle, a move from, factor cost to market price, in principle can improve things, but not necessarily in practice. Precisely because of a number of other things. I mean, one which you mentioned just now, that the size of the black economy has been rising at a rate which nobody knows how big it is and so on. So partly because of that, and partly even in those segments where you are supposed to do all transactions electronically, people will tell you, for instance, stock markets, those who are working there, they will tell you that there is a great deal which actually doesn't happen through the mechanism that is expected to happen. So, yes, there will be problems. On balance, I am not sure whether this will necessarily improve matters in that respect, in terms of capturing, etc.
But still you think,
let me, in terms of maybe international comparisons. Now, we have moved in a direction where you can say that, okay, there is something where, India's system is comparable to a whole lot of other countries.
Exactly. Professor Bhattacharya, my question next is this, that now that we are moving into this, and how do you expect the people internationally to take up these figures? Will they accept these figures on face value?
Well, acceptance, if you mean, first of all, the World Bank and IMF,
Yes.
UN, they conventionally take the face value figures. Then for adjustment, they mainly do in case of exchange rate for comparison. Generally, they don't tamper with the basic data, unless they have a suspicion there is a gross distortion. As far as I know, Pakistan's case sometimes they question, because what IMF even use the word budget rather than budget for Pakistan. No, let me assure you, in India there are errors. Generally we believe these are errors of omissions of your system not being able to capture there is no deliberate error.
Okay.
The statistical system is handled by the competent statisticians. Since I have been chairing them for number of years, I know it. There are errors, and as I told you, informal sector or even agriculture, you get the first information that production is good. Later, after revisions, corrections, you may find that it is not all that good. So errors are there. They are generally unbiased error, generally unbiased. But if there are biased errors, internally sometimes they are corrected. I am not going to reveal all. Some cases I have myself had to intervene. But those are generally not. Indian statistical system is internationally respected. Indian statisticians are hired by UN to go and advise all over the world, all developing country. But until the time all our transactions are recorded through a banking system, we'll still have all these doubts about
Okay, but my next question is, Santosh, how will it affect the economy in the larger sense? These new figures which are coming up, will it mean that it will convince people, say, let us talk of foreign investors itself? Will it convince the foreign investor? You think that there's a much better thing happening there, and we didn't know about it, and now we should go there?
The short answer is no. For the simple reason that while there is a perception of an improvement abroad as well as domestically, and there is a certain feel-good factor, and there is no getting away from that, that could have some impact, but it will be marginal. A major reason why it will be marginal is because, foreign investment is going to grow, the FDI flow into India is going to grow only when we see real evidence of domestic private investors actually increasing investment. And there are real issues about, we don't know the details so far about what has happened to, what is the implication of these numbers for savings rate and investment rate.
You have made that's what I was coming to. You can answer that question. I want Praveen also, all three of you to. Yatish, yes, you want to say something quickly? Yes.
So, one sentence, just that unless domestic private investment grows, you will not see a public foreign investment increasing.
Yes, Yatish.
So on the FDI, I agree with it, but on the foreign institutional investors, it gives them a little much stabler benchmark, say when they're comparing India with Thailand, Malaysia, or the other growth economies.
Okay.
So when Morgan Stanley or somebody is constructing an index, or a rating agency like Moody's is looking at countries' growth numbers, it gives them now a comparative figure instead of they converting it on their own and then comparing it. So from the FIR perspective, it makes things easier to compare. So I mean, I won't say that it will go up, but it makes things easier for them to invest here now in the stock market.
Praveen, will it have, tomorrow is the monetary policy review.
Yes,
you think that these figures will be very on the mind of the RBI governor tomorrow, because there are already demands saying that they should lower the interest rate further. But some people are asking the question, why was the interest rate lowered if the figures are this? Huh?
Exactly. In fact, if anything, my sense is that RBI is not going to tinker with the interest rate. In fact, it took by surprise. Exactly. Everybody was taken by surprise when it happened, and precisely for the reason that you mentioned, that if growth rate is in that zone and so on and so forth, you don't really need to worry about it, because even though inflation has come down, the danger of it, because it has come down almost entirely because of one particular fortuitous factor, which is massive decline in oil prices.
Right.
So given that, most likely the monetary policy review will probably not do anything.
Mr. Bhattacharya?
Well, RBI should not further lower interest rate, but whether they'll do it or not depends. I understand corporate sector is putting a tremendous pressure on them, and finance minister
but
already.
These figures, will these figures help the RBI governor?
It
can operate both ways.
It can operate both ways. It will say, even with high interest rate, if you could grow like this, then why?
You see, it will help Rajan's case.
Yes.
On the other hand, my position on interest rate is different from Professor Bhattacharya's. I think it should be lowered considerably.
Okay. Yatish, very quickly, what do you think as far as RBI's tomorrow's policy is concerned?
Our governor likes to surprise the market. So I don't think so that he would do the normal thing of announcing a cut while announcing a policy.
Okay.
He might do it when he feels like it and when the market expects it.
You have any
quick point.
Very quick point.
That's right. The increase in the growth rate on market price calculation may have implications for this budget in two possible ways, because if it is true that your GDP has grown, then your fiscal deficit gives you a little elbow room to the government to actually increase investment.
We didn't have time to discuss the impact on fiscal deficit. But anyway, I think we are completely run out of time. But it's interesting what has happened, and this discussion should give some better perspective on what this whole new methodology will be about. We'll wait and watch till when the budget comes out. It will be much more interesting, and there will be further discussions on this. Thanks to all my guests, Professor Bhattacharya, Santosh, Mehrotra, Praveen and Yatish, Rajawat. Please keep watching. We'll come back with another issue, big picture, same time tomorrow.